Welcome to the Power of ERDC podcast. I am your host, Tim Reeves. When a blizzard descended on North Carolina's Outer Banks, most people hunkered down. But on the world's most studied beach, the cameras and sensors at ERDC's field research facility did not blink. They remained running and recording, capturing every wave and gust of wind. The surveys conducted afterward gave engineers and scientists a better picture of the storm's ultimate impact. But how do you capture that data with precision? And more importantly, how do you make it so reliable that it can be trusted as scientific evidence to advance coastal science and engineering? Our guest today is Mike Forte, a research physical scientist stationed at the FRF, part of a team of what he called once data custodians, working to make sure the data is collected, consistent, and right, making it, as he said once, a national treasure. Mike, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Hey, doing good, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and earlier before we started recording the podcast, we talked about how envious many of us are of your office window, looking out on just a little thing like the beach and the Atlantic Ocean. Not a bad setup.
Yeah, not at all, Tim. I was saying to Tim before we got started here that the ERDC commander just had visited his first time, Lieutenant Colonel Haynes, and he had asked me how long I'd been working here. Told him more than 20 years, and I said, and I was proud to say that it's still a dream job. So there's not a day I take for granted being able to work at ERDC's field research facility. So yeah, it's a wonderful place, and the office is certainly a real gem as well.
So we're recording this today on a weather that is much different than what we're fixing to talk about, the one you had several weeks ago, months ago during this blizzard. What made this blizzard and nor'easter, this storm that hit in late January, early February, unique from a data perspective? And what did the data, the sensors, and everything tell you later about the wind, waves, and duration of that particular storm?
Yeah, so really, blizzards are very rare to happen on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where the field research facility is located. In fact, it's been since 1980. I did a little homework between the storm and today, and I found out that technically one didn't occur. It was 46 years ago. So they don't typically occur along the Outer Banks because of the relatively warm water surrounding. We have the Atlantic Ocean to our east, and then we have a lot of shallow sounds to our west. So being surrounded by these warmer bodies of water prevent these blizzard-like conditions. And just to let the viewers, I had to look this up when I heard that we were having a blizzard, but a blizzard is considered such when you have winds of 35 miles per hour and whiteout conditions that consecutively last for more than 3 hours. And that's where visibility is reduced to less than a quarter mile. As far as the storm's statistics, I mean, this was really another opportunity to do what we do best here, and that is to measure the environment, and especially storms. So for this blizzard, we had wind gusts measured at the end of the pier reaching 62 miles per hour, and peak wave heights during the storm at 14.5 feet. Now, for context, that wave height that's getting up there, but it really is only about half of the wave height that we've recorded previously. We've had a hurricane produce wave heights of 29.5 feet. That was back in 2003, Hurricane Isabel, and that to this day is still our storm of record when it comes to wave heights. But the storm was, incredibly cold, and we're used to having many nor'easters hit our coast here, and typically the weather's in the 40s and it's damp and it's rain. So having snow and Arctic-like conditions was really an unusual occurrence.
And having been to the FRF, lucky to do so, it really is a suite of sensors across the beach. I mean, you've got things that are observing all the coastal dynamics and stuff. What are some of the measurements? And we mentioned the wave height and the wind speed and stuff, but also there are visual data collections. What are some of the other sensors and stuff that are running at all times to better measure these type events?
Yes, I think we have approximately, I think, 30 sensors that are scattered about the seafloor, mounted on the pier, and then we have, in addition to that, we have an Argus tower, which this is a tower that overlooks our beach, and it has a series of optical cameras in there, so always taking continuous pictures of the beach. We also have a LiDAR tower that's permanently mounted north of the property in the dunes that's continuously scanning the beach and the waves. So those are in addition. And then, so that's those sensors are continuously operating during the storm. And we like to call that's capturing the environmental forcing, so during the storm. But and then we follow that up with how the beach responds. So then after the storm, we try to get out and make our survey measurements, and of course, before the storm. So we can't make survey measurements, although we have been working towards that. Researchers here have been trying to push those bounds so that we can actually make measurements during the storm of elevation change. But that kind of, there's all these instruments, we pride ourselves in keeping these running during the storm. And for this recent blizzard, all of them were operational and captured this storm very well.
So years of FRF data has shown that winter storms, such as this one and nor'easters, can be more erosive than hurricanes. For someone who grew up on the Alabama Gulf Coast, that seems pretty odd because hurricanes are the biggest things we usually have. But why is the long duration of a storm, and I think you said this one, we looked it up, was for 54 hours, I think you record it. So why was this one so destructive to the coast?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so many times we the hurricanes really they kind of produce the most drama. They have probably the most media attention and maybe some of the biggest wave heights. As I mentioned, we had that Isabel at almost 30 feet, 2 miles. That was measured 2 miles off the coast. But the nor'easters, what happens there is that long effect of elevated water levels. And those elevated water levels are driven by the winds, which are creating the waves. And so that continued forcing, and we mentioned 54 hours. We measured 14.5-foot waves at the peak of the storm, but for 54 hours, our waves were 8 feet or higher. And when you take 54 hours, we've had, in that time period, there were 4 high tides that occurred. So when you put these elevated water levels on a high tide, that's typically when you're going to have most of your dune damage, and sometimes those dunes can even be breached if they are not high enough, or they're worn away for long enough. So that's the main driver, Tim, is that long duration, elevated water level and energy just continuing to pound the coast.
One of the we talked about the sensors and cameras and stuff that's constantly monitoring it, but one of the key structures at FRF is the pier, and it's not necessarily a sensor or camera, but a capability nonetheless. In a previous, I think in a conversation you and I had several weeks ago, you mentioned that this pier that stretches out into the Atlantic Ocean from the FRF has not moved a centimeter since it was constructed in 1980. Can you tell us about the pier, the importance and role it plays in collecting data from the most recent storm and throughout its history?
Yes, that is a heck of a statistic, and I'm sure the folks that have built the pier would be proud to know that their construction hasn't changed in a centimeter. And I'll get to how we know that in a moment. But first, the pier serves two main purposes, and in addition, this is a fun fact. In addition to being the East Coast's longest pier, it's 1,840 feet long. But the first is to provide a stable, its original intent was to provide a stable platform to make scientific measurements along the beach and through the surf zone and to the offshore, outside of where the waves are breaking. And the second is to serve as a conduit. Tim, you mentioned all the sensors. We have multiple sensors on the seafloor, and all those are cabled back to our office building. So the pier serves as a conduit for all those cables to run up the seaward-most pier piling and travel all the way down that 1,840-foot length of the pier into the office building, where then the data can be processed and archived. So it's a stable platform to make measurements, and then a conduit for these instruments on the seafloor, and that also continually provides power to those sensors, and then also we get the data which continually flows from those sensors. Now to the 1 centimeter, there's another important measurement that has been being made on the pier since the pier has been built, and that is the water level station. We, in collaboration with NOAA, we have a water level station at the end of the pier, and to maintain that station, these very accurate survey measurements are made on a quarterly basis. So a team from NOAA comes out and they walk a level loop over a series of benchmarks that we have on our property. So from the road, the entrance to the property, they will walk, I think there's maybe 10 or 12 of these benchmarks, and they walk rod and level all the way out to the end of the pier where the tide station is located. And that's how we know that over that time period, the pier has not moved a centimeter, which is quite incredible. And we say either everything is subsiding at the same rate, but we like to think that's not the case. But the pier is a very stable platform, and those elevations are critical because they're referencing a sea level there at the end of the pier, so they need to have an accurate elevation to do that. One more thing to mention: we've been talking about this blizzard, the recent blizzard. We measured, and we're talking about elevated water levels. So during that blizzard, we measured water level of 2.96 feet above mean high water. So that's pretty much high tide. Add an extra almost 3 feet to that, and that's doing the work, eroding the beach. And for context, the top 10 storms are ranked in terms of water level. So this one was just missed the cut. Number 10 is 3.18 feet. So you can see we weren't that far off with this storm in terms of water level, elevated water levels. So that station also serves the state of North Carolina for basing all of its setbacks and sea level estimates. So it's been measuring the sea level since 1977. So and it is one of the few open coast stations in NOAA's tide and current network. So very, very important measurement being made at the end of the pier. as long as as well as the other things I mentioned. For the cables too, it's important to note that without the conduit, the cables would be exposed to tremendous forces in the surf zone. Not only that, because our elevation is changing so much due to morphology evolution, those cables would be exposed and then they'd be buried. And while they were exposed, they could be snapped.
Right.
We've had short-term deployments before where cables have run through the surf, and we've had all kinds of maintenance challenges trying to keep them buried and keep them from snapping. So again, the pier is just a critical piece of infrastructure for the work that we do here at the Field Research Facility.
Well, you mentioned the storm just missing the top 10. I guess you just, tell the storm to try harder. So there you go.
Yeah.
You just missed it. So let me go back. You mentioned NOAA and the state of North Carolina, and these sensors and these deployments and this information, and I'm off script, right? But is not just for ERDC, it's not just for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, it's not just for the U.S. Army and Department of War and others, but there's a community of people, organizations that rely on this data and the capability to collect it.
Yes, that's a great point. I mean, first and foremost, we're serving our U.S. Army Engineer Research Development Center and our engineers with the information we collect. But in addition to that, it is available. We have made all of it available to the world and most of the data in near real time. So we are always hearing about various use cases, and most recently, there's the FRF data is being used in a community called Shore Shop, and Shore Shop it's a near-shore modeling workshop that tests these nearshore models, develop nearshore models, and then look at the data. So this Shore Shop is happening this year, and it's a benchmarking workshop. 34 groups submit their shoreline change predictions in a blind competition, and then those results will be compared to the measurements being made here at the FRF, and that's just one example of folks outside our organization using our world-class data, and we found that the more researchers that use this, the better science is advanced, and furthermore, it also helps us continue to improve our data collection and QA/QC. Sometimes our users will find, hey, this doesn't seem right, and sometimes they can help us improve our existing techniques and the way that we QA/QC the data. So I guess really what I'm saying is the more eyes and the more uses on the data, typically the better feedback, of course, you will get, and improvements can be made.
Let's talk about that. The techniques you mentioned to make this better. Talk about the process, and we've mentioned some of the things, but collecting the raw storm measurements from this storm, and how you make those publicly available. And another question too is, what role do you and your team, as we mentioned, data custodians, play in making sure that data that is publicly available, not just available, but right?
Yes, that's kind of gets to really the heart and soul of what we do, and it's really to start off, it's worth mentioning that these measurements that we're making at our facility are in an extremely difficult environment, which is the surf zone. So I'd like to begin really by saying that the team here has really just acquired so much experience, specialized experience in working in the surf zone, developing tools that can access the surf zone. But Tim, I'll start with, to put a sensor on the seafloor, we need some sort of mounting device. So we will go out and jet some sort of pipe into the seafloor 10, 15 feet deep. We have to ensure that these sensors that we mount, the pipes that we mount to, can withstand the forces of the surf zone. So that's kind of where it begins. We install a pipe, and then we attach a sensor to it. We survey that sensor, lay cable from the sensor, as we talked about, along the pier, which acts as a conduit, and then we begin the data collection. So that typically involves divers to do some of these cable connections under the seafloor, at the instruments when they get installed. So just like to point out that before the data gets into the hands of a scientist or engineer, there's just been a tremendous effort that has gone into getting it there. Now, for the surveys, that's some hands-on work there as well. And one of the really attractive parts that kind of really got me into the hydrographic survey was being able to spend time on the water. So for the surveys, we go out and collect a series of transect profile lines that are shore perpendicular, and we revisit these profiles on a monthly basis, and then more frequently during storms. And the measurements of monthly, so we're kind of always in a state of being ready for a storm to hit. And then after the storm hits, we try to get out as quickly as possible to capture that change that took place. Because each day after the storm, the beach is recovering, and sometimes we miss some of those critical recovery periods because the weather may be too rough, or we can't get a survey in. And then from there, we collect these data, we process the data, and then, as you mentioned, the QA/QC piece is really important. When we publish things for the world, we have to ensure their correctness, because we built an incredible legacy here at the FRF. The folks before me, the folks that are here now, and the folks that'll come will continue to follow that legacy, and that really is, producing the most precise measurements that can be done, that can be made, and then QA/QCing them, and finally, we do a lot of evaluations on. I'll speak specifically on surveys. We evaluate our techniques. We test our platforms against more stable platforms, and then we publish our results so that the scientific community can understand the uncertainties in some of the measurements that we're making. We recently published a journal article that looked at 2 sea states between various surf zone surveying platforms. One being a jet ski, which is broadly used in the hydrographic people that it's surveying in the surf zone typically use jet skis. And we did it in rough and calm conditions, wanting to capture kind of our upper and lower bounds for our uncertainty, our errors. And we did that over 2 days. We repeatedly surveyed the same line 10 times. And anyway, the results came out of that our specialized amphibious craft are more precise than the jet ski. And we thought that going in, but these data really confirmed it. We also learned that the accuracy and precision decrease as the sea state increases. We kind of expected that, but only by a little bit. We're talking centimeters here. But the fact that we're putting this data out there and allowing the folks using the data to see it and understand the measurements just provides that extra piece of validation, and kind of lets folks know the care that we put into the measurements that we're making here.
You mentioned the amphibious vehicle, the Lark, which is a vehicle that y'all use to, for these surveys and stuff. And before I go to the next question, there was one stat that you and your team collected from this recent blizzard, and we'll put photos of this on the podcast website as the resource, but of how much sand and beach was lost during this nor'easter. When you compare the survey before the storm and after the storm, what was the number of the amount of sand lost?
Yes, yeah, we always like to, we work in cubic meters, but you really can't visualize that. So then we take that and we convert it to dump truck loads, because you can really visualize dump truck loads. But this last storm really moved a lot of sediment within the area that we survey, which we'll just call our property here. And it moved the nearshore sandbar much further offshore and built that up, which is pretty typical. These storms behave in a typical way where they erode the beach, and then the storm bar moves offshore, and it almost serves as a way to kind of protect the beach. But in addition to all that sand moving within the property, we also lost, I think it was 877 truckloads of sand left the survey area. So significant amount. And I sent Tim a couple pictures of the dune scarping. So just north of our property, there were some scarps that were probably on the order of 8 feet in the primary dune. So, having that estimate of 877 truckloads it's not a stretch when you see some of the some of the sand that got cut from that primary dune.
So my next question is this data that you're collecting, how is the data from this storm combined with more than 40 years of historical data at the FRF used to create better predictive models and design stronger coastal infrastructure?
Yes, that's a great question. There's a few things there. I think the first, I just really like to kind of reiterate the unique capability here that the ERDC FRF Field Research Facility is able to capture the wave transformation from the continental shelf all the way in through the surf zone. And then now with that LiDAR station that I mentioned earlier, the permanent mounted one in the dune, it's actually able to measure the last uprush of the water when it hits the dune. So having that capability, and these things have been added incrementally over time. So I guess I wanted to start there just to say that this really allows those predictive models, real measurements, so that they can be further advanced. And I like to, when I'm doing, we do some tours for various schools and things. I like to always bring up to the students. I'll say, we take weather forecasting, for instance. Those are really good. I mean, 5 days, we're really able to kind of know if it's going to rain, what the winds are going to be, and we're nowhere near that for understanding the way sand moves around, but we're getting better. So I like to say that's kind of what these measurements are really are advancing, is our ability to predict. So if we get a major storm, where's the sand going to go? And it'll just help the Army Corps in general, with the management of when you think of all the beaches that they're managing, among all the other things, but just the beaches, having these predictive capabilities and being able to advance them to the point of, where the weather is today is really kind of a big reason why these measurements are being made and why we need to continuously make them. Another thing to touch on here, Tim, is storm sequencing. So Why is adding this storm? Well, storm sequences, it's an active research area in the community. But what they're finding is certain groups of storms impact the beach in certain ways that other groups of storms may or may not. So that's another important piece. So yes, it is another storm, but it adds to some of these areas that we're really getting into more and more detail of understanding how this sand moves about. And then, finally, one final point to make here is that there's a lot of technology development here at ERDC. I know here we have teams working autonomous systems, and we are looking at spaceborne measurements. So having up-to-date validation data is critical for these advancements in technology. So, 10, 15 years ago, these spaceborne measurements weren't being made, and some of the autonomous. So just another reason why to continue these measurements into the future, because these validation data need to coincide with as the technology develops, is another important aspect of adding yet another storm to the record.
Well, my last question, and I need to ask it as I am increasingly more jealous of your scenery at your office. And so it would be, you mentioned that the data collected at FRF and the way it's nurtured and the way it's, managed and verified and stuff is a national treasure. Why did you call it that? Why would you describe it as that?
Yes, I can't take the credit for that. It was one of my earlier mentors that really called it that, but it always resonated with me. And it's a national treasure because the pride that is taken from the team here to make really the best measurements that the world can make. That's the first part of this, is that many years that the legacy I like to speak is that we have been doing it to the best that you can do it. So that's a treasure piece. Secondly, having the data available, well described, consistent is just an incredible time saver, cost saver for research to take place. I have been involved in some research projects where gathering data was it could have been 75% of the project. So you go out, you find this, you have to ask questions about this and that. Here at the FRF, the data is documented, QA/QC'd, consistently available on our thread server. And I should just note that almost in real time, these data that we're talking about today are available. And for users that aren't familiar, if you were just to Google CHL data, you would be pointed to our threads data server. And in that, there are various categories: oceanography, geomorphology, and all this is available. So I think that kind of really, and the fact that we're talking now, Tim, 46 years of this. So in the world, there may be, I don't think any other data, I'll speak for surveys, exist both for that many years. And the importance of that is, being able to look not only short time scales and, one storm effect on a beach, but also the evolution of the coastline. So that many years, you can start to look at, storm climatology and all kinds of other interesting things, that you would need a long data record to do. So I could go on and on. The national treasure piece is just a tremendous resource for so many scientists, engineers, coastal planners, and the public.
Well, listen, sir, thank you for the time. Thanks for the work you and your team are doing. And I'll mention to those who are listening and watching, on the website, we will have a link to several resources, including the data site you mentioned, the photos from the storm as well. And for those who would like some more information on the field research facility, the team that Mike and his team are doing, you can email erdicinfo@usace.army.mil, and those requests for information will get back to his team. With that, I say thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.